In 1917, a bald, intense man stepped off a train in Petrograd and changed the course of world history. Vladimir Lenin had spent years in exile, plotting revolution from coffee shops and libraries across Europe. Within 8 months, he would topple the Russian government and create the world's first communist state. His rise was meteoric, his methods ruthless, and his legacy still divides the world today. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov was born in 1870 in Simbirsk, a quiet provincial town on the Volga River. His family was middle-class, educated and respectable. His father was a school inspector, his mother a devoted housewife. Nothing suggested their son would become history's most famous revolutionary. The turning point came in 1887 when Lenin was just 17. His older brother Alexander was executed for plotting to assassinate Tsar Alexander III. The family was devastated, but for young Vladimir it was a wake-up call. The system had killed his brother. The system had to be destroyed. Lenin threw himself into revolutionary literature. He devoured Marx, Engels, and Russian radical thinkers. He joined underground student groups at Kazan University before being expelled for political activities. The authorities were watching him, but they couldn't stop him from thinking. By his early 20s, Lenin had become a professional revolutionary. He moved to St. Petersburg, joined Marxist circles and began writing inflammatory pamphlets. In 1895 he was arrested and sent to Siberian exile for 3 years. It was there, in the frozen wilderness, that he developed his revolutionary strategy. Lenin believed Russia didn't need to wait for capitalism to develop fully before having a socialist revolution. A small, disciplined party of professional revolutionaries could seize power and drag the country into the modern age. It was a radical idea that would reshape the world. By 1917, Lenin had been living in European exile for over a decade. He was in Switzerland when news arrived that Tsar Nicolas II had abdicated. The Russian Empire was collapsing, and Lenin was stuck in neutral Switzerland with no way to get home. Then the Germans made him an offer he couldn't refuse. They would transport him back to Russia in a sealed train car. Why would Germany help a Russian revolutionary? Because they knew Lenin would pull Russia out of World War I, allowing Germany to focus on the Western Front. Lenin arrived at Finland Station in Petrograd on April 3, 1917. The crowd expected him to support the provisional government that had replaced the Tsar. Instead, Lenin shocked everyone with his April Theses, a radical blueprint for revolution. He declared that the provisional government was a tool of the bourgeoisie. He called for immediate peace with Germany, regardless of the cost. He demanded that all land be given to peasants and all power transferred to workers' councils called Soviets. His own party members thought he had lost his mind, but Lenin understood what others didn't. Russia was exhausted by war, starving and ready for radical change. While other politicians talked about gradual reform, Lenin offered simple solutions: peace, land, bread. It was a message that resonated with millions of desperate Russians. Russia in 1917 was a country with two governments. The provisional government controlled the official apparatus of state, but the Soviets, workers' and soldiers' councils, held real power on the ground. Lenin called this dual power, and he was determined to tip the balance. Throughout the spring and summer of 1917, Lenin's Bolsheviks grew stronger. They were the only major party calling for immediate withdrawal from the war. As Russian casualties mounted and the economy collapsed, their message found more supporters. In July, Lenin barely escaped arrest when the government cracked down on the Bolsheviks after a failed uprising. He fled to Finland, but continued directing party strategy from hiding. His key insight was that timing was everything. Too early, and they'd be crushed. Too late, and someone else would seize power. By autumn, conditions were perfect. The provisional government was discredited, the army was disintegrating, and workers were seizing factories. Lenin bombarded his party with letters demanding immediate action. "History will not forgive us if we do not take power now," he wrote. The Bolsheviks controlled key points in Petrograd: the telegraph office, railway stations, and bridges. They had support in the military units guarding the capital. Lenin knew that whoever controlled Petrograd controlled Russia. On October 25, 1917, Lenin made his move. The Bolsheviks didn't stage a popular uprising, they executed a carefully planned coup. While the provisional government met in the Winter Palace, Bolshevik forces quietly seized control of Petrograd. The operation was almost bloodless. Bolshevik troops occupied government buildings, arrested ministers, and took control of communication networks. The famous storming of the Winter Palace was, honestly, more like a peaceful occupation. Most of the defending troops had already gone home. Lenin appeared at the Congress of Soviets that evening to announce the government's overthrow. He immediately issued two crucial decrees: the Decree on Peace, calling for an end to World War I, and the Decree on Land, promising to redistribute aristocratic estates to peasants. The coup succeeded in Petrograd, but Lenin knew the real battle was just beginning. The Bolsheviks controlled the capital, but they were a tiny minority in a vast country. Most Russians had never even heard of Lenin, and, to be honest, many who had considered him a German agent. Lenin's next challenge was consolidating power. He formed the Council of People's Commissars with himself as chairman. He shut down opposition newspapers, dissolved the Constituent Assembly when it produced an anti-Bolshevik majority, and began building a new state apparatus. Within months, Lenin had transformed Russia from a chaotic democracy into a one-party dictatorship. He justified every authoritarian measure as necessary for the revolution's survival. By 1918, Russia was engulfed in civil war. The White Forces, a coalition of monarchists, liberals, and moderate socialists, were fighting Lenin's Red government. Foreign powers, including Britain, France, and the United States, were supporting the Whites with troops and supplies. Lenin's response was, well, brutal. He launched the Red Terror, a campaign of systematic violence against anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution. The Cheka, Lenin's secret police, executed thousands without trial. Entire social classes were targeted for elimination. The violence reached its peak in July 1918 when Lenin personally ordered the execution of Tsar Nicolas II and his entire family, including his young children. Lenin wanted to send a message: there would be no return to the old order. Lenin also implemented war communism, a radical economic policy that requisitioned grain from peasants and nationalized all industry. The policy was an economic disaster that led to famine and industrial collapse, but it helped the Red Army win the Civil War. The Bolsheviks' victory wasn't guaranteed. They controlled the industrial heartland, but the Whites had foreign support and controlled much of the countryside. Lenin's advantages were unity of command, control of weapons factories, and ruthless determination. By 1921, the Whites were defeated, but the cost was enormous. Millions had died in the fighting and the economy was in ruins. Lenin had won power, but ruling Russia was proving even harder than conquering it. By 1921, Lenin faced a crisis. War communism had devastated the economy, peasants were rebelling, and even the Bolsheviks' core supporters were turning against them. The final straw was the Kronstadt Rebellion, when sailors who had helped Lenin seize power now demanded his removal. Lenin shocked his party by announcing the New Economic Policy, or NEP. He was essentially admitting that rapid communism had failed. The government would keep control of heavy industry and banking, but small businesses and farming would return to private ownership. Lenin called it one step backward, two steps forward. Critics called it a betrayal of communist principles. Lenin didn't care. He was a pragmatist who would use any means necessary to maintain power. The NEP worked. Agricultural production recovered, small businesses reopened, and the economy began to grow again. But it created new problems. A class of wealthy peasants and small capitalists emerged, exactly what the revolution was supposed to prevent. Lenin defended the NEP as a temporary measure, but privately he worried about its long-term implications. He was creating a mixed economy that looked suspiciously like capitalism. The question was whether the Communist Party could maintain political control while allowing economic freedom. In May 1922, Lenin suffered his first stroke. He was only 52, but years of stress and overwork had taken their toll. As his health declined, he became increasingly worried about the future of the revolution. Lenin's final writings, known as his Testament, revealed his fears about the Communist Party's direction. He was particularly concerned about Joseph Stalin, who had accumulated too much power. Lenin recommended Stalin's removal, but it was too late. Stalin was already maneuvering to succeed him. Lenin died on January 21, 1924, at age 53. His death marked the end of an era. The man who had promised to create a workers' paradise had instead created a one-party state that would eventually become one of history's most repressive regimes. Lenin's legacy is complex and contradictory. He was a brilliant strategist who seized power when others hesitated. He was also a ruthless dictator who used terror to maintain control. He saved Russia from chaos, but at an enormous human cost. His ideas shaped the 20th century. Communist movements worldwide looked to Lenin's example, creating similar regimes in China, Cuba, and elsewhere. But none of these societies achieved the equality and freedom that Lenin had promised. Lenin believed he was creating a better world, but his methods corrupted his goals. The man who fought against oppression became an oppressor himself. His revolution, which began with promises of liberation, ended with the creation of a new form of tyranny. Lenin's story is a reminder that revolutionary change often comes with a price. His rise and fall continue to influence politics today, showing both the power of radical ideas and the danger of absolute power. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most controversial figures, make sure to subscribe for more content exploring the leaders who shaped our world. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos.